Everyone, and welcome to today's webinar and fireside chat with Georgie Silverwood, who you should be able to see on your screen. Amongst other things today, we're going to explore the key things that differentiate successful candidates from everyone else, the education qualifications versus work experience balance, modern organisations truly value what they value and what they seek from employees, the importance of networking and making connections, how to construct compelling 30-second elevator pitch that will open up doors, tactics for building a high-value professional network, how to get the most out of this COVID-19 situation, and strategies for when we come out the other side. I am Jared Holland, and I am your host and co-founder of Outcome.life. The other good-looking gentleman you will see in your screen is Dominic Saporita, who is my business partner. Outcome.life was founded in 2015 with the grand mission of helping international students get career-related jobs. We do this through running networking events, facilitating high-quality internships, running industry-based projects, and we run startup accelerators for international students. During today's webinar, if you do have any questions, down the bottom there is a chat button or a Q&A button. You click on that and you can post your questions there. And Dom and I and Georgie are able to see them, and we'll look at them throughout the webinar and make sure we address them. Want to acknowledge Study New South Wales, who are sponsoring this webinar series. The New South Wales government established Study New South Wales in 2014 to improve the quality of experience of international students while studying in New South Wales and recognise their contributions to our communities. Study New South Wales is a dedicated unit within the New South Wales government and is responsible for delivering a 10-year international education strategy. That strategy might be changing up a bit at the minute, and outlined in the industry action plan and positioning New South Wales as key markets and a leader in international education that launches global careers. Study New South Wales has four main functions: one, marketing, promotion and research; development of policy and advocacy to enhance the competitiveness for international education in New South Wales; delivery and evaluation of strategies and programs to improve the experiences for international students in New South Wales; and identification and generation of international market development opportunities and new technology and enabled models of delivery, which everyone is currently now experiencing. So in meeting the objective of improving the experience for international students, Study New South Wales has been working tirelessly to ensure that international students feel supported during this COVID-19 crisis and empowering students to come out the other side well prepared to advance their careers. We appreciate that the period of lockdown has been stressful for everyone, particularly international students who are away from their families and have limited support networks. This period, however, does create opportunity if you're willing to adopt a positive mindset and willing to get the most out of this situation. With that in mind, we are delighted that Georgie has been able to join us today to provide some insights into breaking into the graduate employment market. Quick bio on Georgie for those that don't know her, but Georgie is a partner in international executive search firm Amrop Carmichael Fisher, and is the previous head of graduate recruitment for PwC Australia and manager of experience recruitment for PwC China and Hong Kong. Along with recruitment, Georgie has also worked extensively with organisations in relation to internal and external talent management strategies, diversity and global talent mobility. Georgie has been involved in the recruitment of thousands of graduates, postgraduates and school leavers from Australia and internationally throughout Asia Pacific region, and knows what it takes for them to stand out, present a compelling value proposition and ultimately land a great job. Some more interesting info on Georgie is that before moving into HR and recruitment, Georgie spent 3 years working as an auditor. The good news about that is that Georgie appreciates that her first career move did not have to be her last. And speaking to another auditor of 4 years here, thank God for that. After leaving PwC, she spent 2 years working with a startup based in Melbourne and New York. Whilst ultimately she left the organisation, it taught her a lot about resilience, speed of decision-making and being agile. Some very key characteristics we'll talk about today. Georgie lived and worked in Beijing for 2 years with her husband and had her first child over there. It's still her favourite part of the world, and she goes back every year to see friends and colleagues. I don't think you'll be going this year, Georgie.
No, sadly.
and accompanies her husband with his work too, and to take her daughter to Mandarin summer school. So to unpack more of that, welcome, Georgie. Thanks for taking the time to join us. And maybe just firstly, how are you and how are you handling this COVID-19 situation?
Thanks, Jared. I am well. I think as well as anyone can be, I think, in this situation. And I'm probably feeling like a lot of us a little bit bored, just in terms of, missing the things that we normally get to do. And I think perhaps the things we took for granted, going out for breakfast, going to restaurants, catching up with friends. Particularly I miss my family who all live in country Victoria, so not getting a chance to see my parents and my brother. But I also think I'm quite lucky compared to a lot of other people. So, I've got my immediate family around me. We're comfortable in our house. We're all really healthy. So, I have to be pretty grateful, I think, and when you look around and see what other people are dealing with at the moment, not just in Australia but around the world, then yeah, overall I think I'm well. I am getting used to the concept of spending a lot of time with my children, so that's been interesting. And I take my hat off to teachers, because having to homeschool two kids, it's given me, I think, a newfound appreciation for our educators. So that's been very interesting, and finding a way to juggle, which I'm sure, I'm not alone in that, but being able to kind of manage work and also manage to get the 6 hours or whatever it is of study and school in for the kids each day is interesting. I think the tough thing, and I think we're all experiencing this, is it's just everything is so unknown. Maybe in the past week or two, I feel like the world has moved, or Australia has moved, into a bit more of a groove of, we're in it now, we kind of know what we're dealing with, we know what it means to be in our version of lockdown or stage 3 restrictions. And so I think people have developed a bit of a way of doing things that they're dealing with. But, I'm someone who probably enjoys knowing what's going to happen next and where I'm going next and what I'm doing. And I think trying to make decisions about life and work and kids and family without really knowing, what things are going to be like tomorrow or the next month or, the next 6 months, I think that's where it's really interesting. And I'm having to learn to sit in a bit of a level of uncomfortability and just accept that, you can't know everything. So, but yeah, that's a long way of saying that I'm well. I'm doing fine.
Yeah, and I think learning to be uncomfortable becomes a pretty important characteristic. And even
it does, yeah.
There's a lot of businesses that don't know what the future holds anymore, and people in their personal lives don't know what the future holds.
Yeah, absolutely.
Travel again, and all the simple things that we do. You've had quite a similar career pathway to Dom and myself, and the parts that are similar in that we all started our careers in big accounting firms. We've all worked in a startup, and we've all launched our own initiatives, our own businesses. And so it'd be good maybe just talk us through your career path to date.
Sure. I finished school. I grew up in a town called Warrnambool, which is southwest of Melbourne, about 3 hours away. And you did one of two things when you left school there. You either stayed in Warrnambool and probably went straight into work, or a lot of people were farmers as well, so they went down that path, or already lived on farms, or you had to move away really to go to university. And so that was always a given for me, that I would, at the age of 17, head off to Melbourne to go to university. And I probably had what I would call a fairly typical university and sort of first stage career. So I did a commerce arts degree. I chose that degree because I knew that it was a good degree in terms of being able to have lots of opportunities to get a job at the end of it, and there was lots of scope to do different things in that degree. And I did an accounting finance degree because, again, knew that it was a good way of getting into that first career or grad position. And that for me was going down the path of Big Four. So I joined PwC as initially a vacation student. I went through that traditional graduate or vacation recruitment process that they do at universities still today. Worked for the summer holidays in my penultimate year of uni, and then as an outcome of that got a grad job. So for that last university year, I knew that I was going to be going to PwC and work in audit and work in the banking and finance sector of audit. So auditing insurance companies, banks, superannuation funds, etc. And to be honest, I probably didn't think that much about how I was going to get to that point. So it kind of just rolled through university, and that's very lucky. I think it's 20 years ago now, even more than 20 years ago, since that was the process I went through, and I think I was in a perhaps much easier time. I think there were more grad jobs, the economy was strong. University was a bit different then in that it was kind of the path that you took. You went to uni, you went and worked in a corporate or a professional services firm, and so the decisions almost sort of made for you in some ways. I probably didn't think as much as I think you guys have to think now about what the options are, what the alternatives are. So I got to PwC, and I had a great few years working in audit. But it's really interesting when I reflect back now and probably having hindsight behind me. I think one of the things that's really important when you're choosing or thinking about what you want in a grad job is to play to your strengths and do something that gives you energy. And I chose accounting because it made lots of sense. It was a good way to get a stable job, and that was really important to me at the time. But if I looked back on the things that I loved about that vocation and about working as an auditor, it was the stuff that really wasn't about the audit. It was about the connections to my clients, and I loved having conversations with them about their business, and I loved coaching and mentoring junior staff, and I loved the collaboration when you were sitting in a room together doing the work, but you were bouncing ideas off at each other. And that kind of had nothing to do with accounting itself and the numbers. So the things that I loved about that role, I then looked at how I might be able to transfer them in a different way. And I was really lucky at PwC. They, back in the day, had, and I don't know that they do it anymore, but you were able to go on secondments into HR and into recruitment to basically support the peak season of graduate recruitment each year. And so I got an opportunity to do that secondment, and I essentially never left. So I stayed there. I worked in graduate recruitment and ultimately ran PwC's grad recruitment nationally, which was an amazing experience. And I still think, when I look back on my career, one of the most formative experiences, but also one of the most exciting things, because there's nothing better than going to a careers fair or going to a session a bit like this, but live, where you've got the energy of, potentially thousands of students who are all really excited about potentially working in the organisation that you're representing. And so that was an amazing experience. I then kind of morphed into doing more experienced recruitment and looking at recruitment of partners. And then from there, got an opportunity to move overseas to Beijing. So I was really lucky to go to Beijing just as China was really beginning to open up. They were about to host the Olympics. And they were really looking, certainly from a PwC perspective, but I think more broadly at the time, to countries like Australia and the US in terms of how they would model some of their big multinationals, and bringing in essentially skills from overseas to help then develop those skills on the ground in China. So I had an incredible experience there. The growth in China was mind-boggling. We lived basically on a construction site because we were in one tower, and there were 6 towers being built around us in Chaoyang, and it remains the 2 best years of my life for many reasons. But the experience I had working, in a big organisation there was amazing. It was fast-paced, it was frenetic, it was often chaotic. We were recruiting, up to 5,000 or 6,000 people a year at different levels. So just the quantum was amazing. I spent 2 years there. My daughter was born over there, and then we moved home back to Australia, where I continued at PwC for a couple of more years, doing quite different stuff, more in talent and strategy, which was great. And then I left after I had my second child. And I then started my own business, which at that stage was really a way of, to some extent, just keeping my options open and having something to do while I was essentially still on maternity leave. And it was working with small to medium-sized enterprises in the HR space, mostly the talent and leadership space, which was great. And from there, I went and worked with a startup. it was quite an early stage startup, and it was looking at how you could do virtual interviewing through video conferencing, recording videos or recording snapshots of resumes to then use to deliver value propositions for candidates to businesses. And it was a great business. It was a really cool setup. It was run by a guy who was who shared his time between Australia and New York, and so we very much worked across 2 different time zones in 2 different markets. It was very much about being resourceful, and you had to really work hard with quite limited resources, because the investors wanted to see that that money was being spent on product development and focusing on improving the business, not on spending money on, business class flights or things that were kind of, extra that you really didn't need to deliver a great product. So it taught me a lot around doing stuff yourself and having to be really resourceful in terms of figuring out how to do something, because you can't just call some consultant to come in and help you the way perhaps I used to get to do at PwC. So it was a really cool experience. Ultimately, I left there after a couple of years, and the business pivoted to do something a bit different. And then I essentially rolled my consulting business into where I still am now, which is with Amrock Carmichael Fisher. And there I do a combination of executive search, so looking to identify and recruit really senior people into organisations, so COOs, CEOs, HR leaders, heads of business, partners, into a really broad range of organisations, both kind of blue chip, top tier ASX 20, down to some smaller SME businesses, and then as well as that, doing a lot of work around leadership, diversity, talent management. I do a bit of facilitation, so it's exciting, and I'm really lucky I get to do that in a way that also works for my family and my other commitments. So I tend to get to work in school hours or at night, and I can manage things that way, which is great. But it's interesting. I think I'm not in the career that I thought I would be when I left school or I left university, and there's not one part of my career that I regret or wish I didn't take on, because every part of it has given me a really interesting experience, and I think added to my skill set and the value proposition that I now take out to my clients. And I think that's a big learning, is that you have to do what you love. You have to play to your strengths, and I think you'll be a much bigger success when you play to your strengths rather than trying to do something you think is the right career to have. I think you have to take every opportunity, the good, the bad, the ugly, because it all does go on to kind of shape you. So yes, that's my career so far.
Brilliant. And I've written down a whole lot of notes out of that I want to go a bit deeper in with you. We're going to come back to playing to your strengths. But if we look at your pathway and what you've done, pretty much every professional I know has had a career that's gone up and down and all over the place. It's not a structured program that a lot of graduates think it is. And I want to dig a bit deeper into that in a second as well. It's funny how you ended up in audit was the exact same way I ended up in audit, in that when I was leaving school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And so I thought, well, commerce is a pretty broad degree. I'll go and do commerce. And then process of elimination from actuary and management and marketing and accounting. I did accounting because there's lots of jobs in accounting back then. And that's something we can talk a bit more later, that, back 20 years ago, there was far more graduate jobs than there are now. It's very, very competitive. And then I ended up falling into one of the accounting firms because I did accounting as a degree and ended up in audit. But I didn't really plan to get there. But what's interesting is that the hardest job you ever get is your first job. And then once you're in the system, you can move around. And I think a lot of probably people coming out of the university system at the minute probably don't appreciate that, in that they think that they need to go and land their dream job straight away. And we know that because we talk to students every single day, and there's a lot of pressure on being in a very niche part of, say, engineering, that they must work in this exact role. But it actually doesn't matter what you do as you first go into your first role. You will move around once you're in the system. And there's a PwC article that I mentioned to you when we were preparing for this webinar that I don't know how many years ago it was now, but what they said was that they, in their accounting division, they stopped hiring people that had an accounting degree. And their methodology was, and their theory was, and maybe you're there at the time and you're part of the thought leadership behind it, that I think makes complete sense, is that they started hiring art students into their accounting division. And
Yep.
the theory was that you could train an art student how to do the technical accounting stuff, which, mind you, isn't that hard, easier than you could train a stereotypical accounting student to have all those soft and critical skills and complex capabilities to build rapport with their clients.
Yep.
And you mentioned before that what you loved most about being in an audit was all the stuff dealing with clients, which when I look back is the stuff I loved. Ticking off a spreadsheet for invoices being collected and paid on time is the most mind-numbing, boring work you could do. But I love the fact that I went to a different client every few weeks and got to hear about their business and build relationships. So I just want to touch on that a bit. One, PwC's sort of approach where they took several years ago in changing the type of people they wanted to hire based on more the soft and critical capabilities than the technical, because they can teach the technical.
Yep.
And then maybe then lead that into how your career can take many different directions once you get in the sector. Don't be so paranoid about getting the dream job as your first job.
Yep. And look, PwC, I think, was quite leading in that, and it is about 7 or 8 years ago now. I was definitely there at the time, and it was a huge decision to do that. But it actually started, and you might recall as well, but when I was a grad or when I was going for grad jobs, it was something that a lot of the consulting firms had already started to do. Because they knew that if they just got the smartest people into an organisation, they could absolutely teach them consulting methodology, whether it was Boston or McKinsey or Bain or what have you. They could teach them that consulting methodology, and if they had the smarts and the client relationship skills, they could then apply that to any organisation with any client, and be adaptable and resilient and agile to be able to work in those organisations. And so PwC and the other accounting firms had struggled with how they could do that, because the challenge you've got in, say, audit, which you would recall, is in order to actually sign an audit opinion, you have to have a chartered accounting qualification. And to get that, you have to have a certain number of subjects that you've done in accounting at university. So it took a lot longer for accounting firms to get there. But essentially, PwC did work out that we just needed really smart people. We needed smart people who could talk to clients and who could kind of pick into problems and get to the root cause and the issues. And they could learn the T accounts and the debits and credits and all of that sort of stuff on the job. And they could even do the bridging subjects, through taking half a day off work a week to be able to finish that last 2 subjects in uni. So they could go off and do their chartered accounting qualification. And so what we found is, you've got people who were really passionate about the industry because they hadn't just fallen into accounting. They'd made an active choice to say, well, I did an engineering degree or I did a science degree because when I left school, I thought that's what I wanted to do. But as I've gone through and I've researched the organisations I want to work in and the companies that I want to engage with, actually I think I'd be a really good accountant or a really good auditor or a great tax professional. And so I'm actively choosing that, and I understand to get there I'm going to have to pick up a few technical skills along the way, but I think I'll be good at it. And I can prove that. And so I think it did 2 things. One, for PwC, it opened up our market to be able to take the best and the brightest from any industry, from any university degree. And if I look at the ones that really, there were a lot of guys and girls that we recruited from engineering because they had the maths and the kind of logical mindset that worked in assurance as well. Lots of people who came from science degrees, definitely from arts degrees, medical degrees, a huge range of backgrounds. And so for PwC, we got really smart people, and then you were able to teach them the technical skills, which to some extent only mattered for the first 5 or 10 years of their career, because after then it came back to the fact that the thing that you needed to be a success, the thing you needed to be a successful manager and senior manager and director and partner was technical skills had to be there, but ultimately the ability to engage with clients, to really understand their needs, to show how you create value for them. That stuff was all around them, not the softer skills, but things that you never were going to get from a degree in the first place. So that was great for PwC. And then for candidates, it meant that you were actually picking people who had a passion and an interest in joining PwC or joining KPMG or what have you, not just people who perhaps like you and I did the accounting degree, therefore the options were join a professional services firm, become an auditor, become a tax professional, what have you. So yeah, it was a great move, and I think most organisations in that profession have followed suit, and it's been a real success.
And how important is getting people that have the right attitude when you're sort of looking at that matrix of what you look for, but the people that are enthusiastic and they want to learn and they're just eager, and how hard is that way?
Huge, I think, and not just I think if you talked to any senior leader in big or small organisations who are recruiting graduates, the attitude piece is so critical, because let's not sugarcoat it. As a graduate, there are times when you're going to be doing pretty mundane stuff. You are essentially the most junior person in an organisation, and the reality is you're not going to be getting to sit down and talk to the CEO of Telstra in your first week. You might be sitting in a room and you might be ticking and bashing, debits and credits. You might be looking at invoicing reports and doing some really quite, you might be sitting in a spreadsheet for days, because that's what you have to do as a graduate to sort of earn your stripes and get the fundamentals so that you can progress up to those more senior roles. And so people who can take every opportunity that they get and see it as a learning opportunity and take something from that are the people that organisations want. So I think attitude is attitude and mindset, I think, are two of the most critical things in a graduate, because as I said, you do have to sometimes put aside your ego, put aside what you'd love to be doing, and accept that you're the most junior person, so you've just got to do the work, and that the rewards will come down the track.
Yeah, and you mentioned learning opportunity then. I actually believe the first 2 years of starting your first professional job, you are actually getting paid to learn.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of graduates and students don't actually appreciate this. But you are getting the best training of your life, and you're getting paid to get trained. And I think if you can take that attitude, it doesn't matter if you go to a small business, a startup, a big business, or one of the consulting firms, it doesn't matter. Your learning curve is so steep in that first couple of years, and you're so fortunate enough they're paying you to learn. Yep,
absolutely. And there's, I was involved when I was in graduate recruitment. We did a study around how long does it take before we are actually making money from our graduates. And it's surprising how long it takes, because one of the best things about organisations who take on graduates is that they know that it's not just about paying a salary. It's about investing in coaching and mentoring. It's about investing in training and development programs. And a lot of the time you spend as a grad, which is amazing, is actually not physically doing the chargeable work. It's all of the other stuff that you need to set yourself up for success, and that organisations know that you need to set yourself up for success. And I think once you get into an organisation, you're really grateful for those opportunities, and you can't believe sometimes that you're getting paid to, spend 3 days doing a program around mentoring and coaching and how do you deliver that to, more junior staff members. But that's the type of stuff you're getting paid to do. And you realise that the organisation is then paying some external consultant to come in and deliver that program to you. So I think you're absolutely right. I think you do get paid to learn in those first couple of years in an exciting and really experiential way. And in that way, a grad is very lucky.
Yeah. Particularly
I think it's hard to realise until you get there.
Yeah, particularly in a very competitive job market now, and it's with COVID, it's going to be exponentially worse. You seconded to HR pretty quickly. This is obviously something that happens a lot in the business world that, again, students and graduates probably don't appreciate, that it actually doesn't matter what your first role is, because once you're in the system, you can move around very, very quickly and easily, and look at all the different stuff that you've done and working in China, and things just start unraveling for you. I just want to maybe just touch on that a little bit deeper as to, and the reason I want to ask is we do meet a lot of students that are so fixated on having a very, very, very particular first role, and they cannot change their mindset. It doesn't matter how much we explain to them. Don't worry so much about what your first role is. It doesn't need to be perfect. Once you're in there, you'll move yourself around. It is fine. So I just want to go into with your experience and advice around those type of students that we're talking to that are so fixated on having the first perfect role.
Yep. And I think that's right. I think it's not even about it's not just having the organisation, then if you just get in there, it's okay. I think it doesn't matter in many ways what graduate job you take or what your first experience is. It's just getting that first experience that's important. And that is absolutely the platform then to go off and do other things. But I think certainly in terms of an organisation, it comes back to that point that you can train someone and you can teach someone to do the nitty-gritty and the technical stuff. But if you get a good person in your organisation, you're going to find other opportunities for them, because the reality is you've got someone in there that you know has lots of potential. And as a business, it's a good decision to use them in a way that's going to add the most value to that organisation, make the most money for that organisation. They've got a finite number of resources, of which you're one of them, and they're going to put you in the space that you're going to excel at, because it's good for you, but it's also good for them. So I think getting into an organisation is the first step. And I think accepting that your first grad job might not be the sexiest role you ever heard of, and it might not be what you feel like for the past 3 or 4 or 5 years at university you've worked towards. But I think you have to then just back yourself in to say that once you're in there, you'll be able to demonstrate and show that you have the technical smarts, you've got the attitude, you've got the mindset, and you've got the potential to go off and do, other things. And also remembering that it doesn't then mean you've somehow got to find your way back to what you thought was your dream job at uni. Because I can guarantee for most people, what they thought they wanted in a career when they first went to university never ends up being not just what they did, but actually what they wanted. I can say I wanted to be a lawyer when I was in year 12, and I missed out on by 1 mark in getting into law, and I remember being devastated at the time.
And thanking God you didn't get in.
Exactly. And then I did some law subjects through my commerce degree and realised that would have been a terrible move for me. So it was fate. But, I don't look back now and think, I really wish that I could have done law. It's just, I think the world, your attitudes change, your experiences change you and shape you. And I think being fixated too much on what you thought was your dream role, you're much better to open up, your mind to doing different things and seeing where that takes you. And there's, countless stories of amazing CEOs who, never thought they'd be there. They thought they're at A, they thought they'd be at B. No one said that, when I left school, I said I wanted to be the CEO of X, Y, and Z company, so I had to work really hard to get there. The chances are they've ebbed and flowed and moved around, and that happens to be where they've landed at the end through their experiences and different decisions they've made along the way.
Yeah, I don't think I know anyone that's followed the exact path they set out for themselves. And mind you, how boring would life be if you just set out a path and you followed that exact path?
Absolutely.
And I got given some really good advice early in my career about thinking about your career in 2-year blocks. So what do you want to be doing in 2 years' time? Okay, well then, is what I'm doing now, whether it's a new role or current role or moving inside an organisation or going to work in a startup or whatever it is that going to help me get to where I want to be in 2 years' time? But you don't need to think too much longer than that, and don't think shorter than that, but just think, how do I get to where I think I want to be in 2 years' time? And that's how you can make decisions during those time periods.
I think that's smart. And I think if anything has, if this whole situation of COVID-19 has taught us anything, is that you should have goals, but you also need to be flexible. And, 2 years to me makes lots of sense because it's a finite enough time frame to set some really tangible things that you'd like to achieve, but not so far in the future that you're putting too much pressure on yourself that you have to take a certain path, and you can't be agile to pivot and move because circumstances create that need. Yeah.
So you did mention the current climate now with COVID. So, only a couple of months ago, the world was a different place. And it's been turned upside down for lots and lots, millions and millions of people. Not to mention the people that have actually lost their lives during this virus. But what advice do you have for our listeners who are, maybe they're current students, maybe they're just graduating, for adapting to this new environment that we're in, both in the short term right now and in a couple of months' times, that hopefully in Australia at least we're going to start unraveling some of those restrictions?
Yeah, I think first of all, none of us can be too hard on ourselves. You know, I think it's really easy to focus on what we haven't achieved or don't have or are not going to be able to achieve, and that can be quite demoralising and quite depressing. And, you know, I think the fact is that there's so much stuff that we would have all expected we would be able to do and achieve, and goals we've set for ourselves that just won't be possible right now. And that's absolutely the case for all of you who are, you know, getting to the stage of finishing your university degree or looking for a grad job. You know, the goalposts haven't just moved. The goalposts have been picked up and thrown away, essentially, which is really scary. And I feel for all of you in terms of going through that, because, as I said before, I like to know what's going on, and I find uncertainty really hard. And I think for people who are looking for that first job, I think that would be even heightened. So, you know, I don't want to deny the fact and not say to you that, like, it's okay if it's feeling pretty crappy right now, because we're all in a really tough place, and you guys are in a tough place in that way. Some of you would have done work around the circle of control and circle of influence and what you can and can't worry about. And I think that's one of the things that's good to focus on, is that you can't be fixated on things you can't control. Because if you focus on things you can't control, it's not going to get you anywhere. Whereas if you focus on the things you can influence at the moment, then you can make some inroads. And the things that you can influence are the way that you go about your day and the things that you choose to do with the time that you have. And so I think focusing on some of that stuff is really important. And the first one I would say, which I've continued to do, partly out of necessity because I've got kids who have to get up in the morning and start school each day, and then partly because it's what keeps me sane, is having a bit of a schedule, and nothing too rigorous, but just having a plan that each day I get up and I do certain things. And I think for people who are at university, it's the same thing. Or if you're, you know, looking for your grad job, it's the same thing. Having some kind of schedule that keeps you accountable and allows you to look at the day and say, well, okay, I achieved this today. I didn't get this done, but I got that done, and I feel like I've made some inroads, is really good. So if your day used to involve getting up and going to university for a few lectures and then going to the gym and maybe catching up with some friends for coffee in the afternoon, then find ways to continue to do something like that. So you might not be able to get to your university lectures, but you can jump online and maybe do a short course, or you can spend some time, you know, reading a management theory book or a book about innovation or whatever it might be, and still trying to get outside to go for a walk, even though you can't go to the gym, or jumping on one of the many online fitness videos that you can now do. Whatever it is to kind of keep you in a bit of a structure, I think is really important. And I don't think that matters whether you're a 5-year-old or a 90-year-old or a university student or a person who is trying to get their job done during the day. Schedule is helpful. But then also saying sometimes that I'm having a really crappy day, so I am going to stay in my pajamas and watch Netflix. You know, I think not being too hard on yourself. I'm a really positive person. I'm an extrovert and I'm a positive person. And so for me, trying to find positives in the situation and also trying to find opportunities for human engagement in the situation are the two things that I find really important. And you know, it is really hard being stuck at home. And I think for lots of you guys, you're thinking about not just being stuck at home, but you're also thinking about maybe your home is another country far, far away, and, you know, you can't get to see your family. And maybe you're thinking about, you know, I'm meant to be working my casual job to help me to pay for my university studies. And, you know, that's really tough as well. So I imagine you guys have got a lot on your mind that isn't just about, you know, personal development and getting the grad job and all of that sort of thing. But if you can think about the time that you've got and use that to your advantage, I think that's a really good thing. So, you know, time is something we normally don't have any of, and I think at the moment we probably do have a bit more. So investing in preparing for your graduate applications, thinking about the organisations you want to apply for, and researching. Anything that you can do to get a bit of a step up while you've got the time to do it, I think is a good way to kind of take advantage of the situation and at least find, a silver lining within it.
Georgie, what advice would you give many of the students who are stuck at home with plenty of time about self-learning? Because as we know, graduate roles is all about software in many industries. So do you have any advice around that?
Yeah, I think it's a perfect time to do lots of self-learning and self-development, and it's one of those things that if you've got a full load of university subjects, then you don't maybe get time to do much of that by the time you've done your tutes, done your lectures, and done your prep for exams and projects and assignments and things. So I would say if you are in the mindset and you're feeling positive enough that you can sit down and focus on some self-learning and self-development, it's a great time to do it. And I think we're really lucky these days that there is so much online that you can do. So, I know some of the universities are doing free short courses for anyone who wants to take them on. I know Deacon's got some at the moment around innovation and building strategy, and you don't even have to go to Deakin to do it. So, things like that are really great. And again, I know TAFEs have also brought out courses that you can do for free or for, heavily discounted prices. And if I were in your position at the moment and looking for grad jobs, and we've just talked about how maybe the technical skills of your university degree isn't all that employers are looking for at the moment, then I would take advantage of doing some things that are perhaps outside what you do on a daily basis at university. Yep. So if you're studying a commerce degree, look at some courses around philosophy, or look at some courses around innovation, or things that sit a little bit apart from what your university degree is, but actually will help you when you start having those conversations with employers, because employers want to see that you are well-rounded, that you're well-read, that you have opinions, that you have perspectives that are not just, I know my course and I can tell you all about, accounting, and I can tell you all about finance, but I'm a one-dimensional person when it comes to everything else. If you've had this time to be able to get some different perspectives, learn some new things, then you'll be surprised at how much that helps you when you're in an interview and you're being asked about, politics, or you're being asked about the current economic landscape, or you're talking about things that you do outside of, your university studies. So I would take advantage of getting to do some stuff that, maybe is a bit different that you would normally do.
Yeah. Well, we had a question from Rose who asked, what are 3 strategies to differentiate yourself in an interview? I think you mentioned one of those, and that is that in an interview, if you can differentiate yourself as, during COVID-19, I went and did all this, that would be a great way to differentiate yourself. You have a couple of other suggestions for Rose?
Yeah, in terms of differentiating yourself, I think companies need to see that when they plant you into the organisation, or when they plant you out at a client, that you're going to be able to be a credible person for that client or for the people that you're working with. And so for me, it's around them being able to see the skills that you have to do that. So along with obviously self-learning and getting broad perspectives around the world that we live in, the economy that we work in, all of that sort of thing. I think the other thing that's really important, and it's tough right now, but is to get work experience if you can. And I don't mean it has to be paid work experience. It can be things like simply, it could be volunteering at a soup kitchen. It could be at university you write for the university newspaper. A whole range of things that just sets you apart a little bit and demonstrates that in a working environment you can do things like prioritise. You can do things like manage expectations. You can take instructions from leadership and then kind of proactively take that away and work through a problem. So I think any kind of work experience, or what they used to term extracurricular, is really, really helpful. And then the third piece, I think, for me, that always used to set people apart is that piece around attitude. And one of the really good ways, I think, to demonstrate attitude and mindset is to use storytelling. So all of us have a story. All of us have things that we've experienced. And I think for a lot of you guys who have literally packed up your lives and moved from overseas to Australia to take, what I think is a big risk, to come to university here where maybe you don't know anyone, you have a really small support network, and you've got to just get on and do it. I think that's incredibly courageous, and it's a story.
But how do international students practice storytelling? Because as I've gotten older, I've gotten better and better at telling stories and making them interesting.
Yeah.
But how do international students, for example, how do they practice storytelling?
Look, I think it's practice. So my view would be, and now again is probably a really good time to be doing it. There's nothing to stop you and your friends sitting on a Zoom call like this and role playing and practicing, and whether it's practicing sort of interviewing or practicing storytelling, or developing almost that stump speech or kind of value proposition. It's a really good time to be honing that. Yes. And to doing that. So my view is practice makes perfect, and I think it really does. And so with the storytelling piece and the kind of setting up your value proposition and being able to articulate what you bring to an organisation, I think simply getting a friend to do that with, or getting a mentor, someone perhaps who is already at work, working with them to help practice and hone and craft that is probably the best way to do it. Someone said to me the other day, they were talking to their CEO, and they were saying, I've worked out that great leaders tell great stories.
Yes.
And I think it's absolutely true. So where you can start to develop that in yourself, I think is, will set you apart.
I remember that when I was helping out doing the graduate recruitment at Pitcher Partners for many years, that we didn't have a lot to ask the graduates because they hadn't done much. And so therefore we got them to talk to us about the different things that they've done in their lives outside the university. And it was those people that were able to make the invisible visible, able to articulate all the different things they've done and show their passion and really, because we hire people, we don't hire robots.
Exactly.
And so especially in professional services firms like PwC, Pitcher Partners, we want people that are going to be able to work within a team and also work with our clients. So the technical skills, and this is in answer to a question from Alexandra, what advice would you have for people who are not getting HDs and Ds? Well, to me, the answer is show that you're a real person that's going to be able to work with the team in an organisation and to work with our clients. So have any thoughts on that?
I think that's absolutely right. I think, a graduate interview is incredibly different to interviewing someone for a COO role, because you don't have rafts of experience to talk about in terms of all the different career moves that you've made and what you've done and the projects you've delivered and all of that sort of thing. It's a really different interview, and it is very much more about tapping into what are your soft skills that you have, or what are the kind of character traits that you possess that the organisation can see will apply and be of benefit in their organisation. And so, you would all know the kind of standard approach to interviewing in terms of, and there's different acronyms for it, but you talk about the situation, you talk about the action, you talk about the result or the outcome. And I think practicing that, and again, it's a good time to do this, but thinking about that in the context of what you've done outside of obviously work, because you haven't had much work, but what you've done in the past, and the experiences that you've had, and the move that you've made to Australia, and some of the things that you had to do in order to survive out here and to thrive out here, and how you've demonstrated resilience in all of that. To me, great marks are great. And, a certain level of capability when it comes to your marks will get you in the door in terms of an interview or, a first phone interview or a conversation. And it is important in that it does demonstrate that you've been able to understand technical material and, commit to your studies and apply yourself and all of that sort of thing. So I never want to take away from the fact that, marks have a level of importance, but I think not to the detriment of having a well-rounded background and experience. So I would much rather, and hand on heart, this was my reality when I was running graduate recruitment, is I would much rather someone who had, got reasonable marks, throughout their university degree and demonstrated that they had the smarts to be able to do the work. But maybe their marks weren't as strong as the person who had the next resume because they had also held down a part-time job. They'd had to care for their maybe younger sister because, you know, their mum and dad weren't around or whatever it might have been, but that they had some kind of life experience that meant maybe they couldn't spend quite as much time in the books, you know, each week. Yeah. But that life experience gave them a richer, you know, broader value proposition that to me and to, you know, all the people that I was working for who were essentially hiring into their team thought was more important.
Yeah. I get into a lot of trouble because I'm not allowed to tell students to stop studying, but I do, and then I get into a lot of trouble. But you know, Gerard and I have this saying that for every hour you spend studying, we feel that you should be spending on your personal self, on your personal brand and your personal experiences. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. And I think that doesn't mean that sort of spending it on yourself has to be always doing a different course or doing some work around your core beliefs or whatever it might be. It can be as simple as playing a sport, having a casual job at a restaurant, whatever it might be, that also gives you energy, that gives you different perspective, that allows you to engage with people that you might not otherwise engage with. You know, you learn a lot from talking to other people. Yeah. So I think you're absolutely right. I think that too much time spent only studying just limits your ability to have broad perspectives, have a well-rounded value proposition and that type of thing.
And I'll hand over back to Gerard in a second, but Pradisha asked a quick question. Are there any roles for engineers at PwC and firms like PwC?
So I couldn't tell you right this very moment whether there are, in terms of obviously the current climate. I think it's, you know, it's an interesting one for grad programs across the board. But certainly in any normal year, absolutely, engineers are a sought after degree qualification for not just PwC, absolutely PwC, but all the professional services firms, all the consulting firms, and to be perfectly honest, most corporates. I always said the unicorn degree was engineering and commerce for someone like PwC, because you have, you know, the ability to work with data, you've got technical capability, you've had to be pretty smart to get into that degree in the first place, and you learn to problem solve. So if you look at a lot of the guys who have been really successful in some of those really high-end consulting firms like a McKinsey, a lot of those guys have engineering backgrounds. Yeah. Because one of those degrees that you can apply to any other any organisation. You look at a lot of CEOs in mining, in retail. You know, engineering is a great degree. And I don't think it matters what type of engineering it is either, you know. But certainly, yes, PwC in any year would absolutely take on a lot of engineering grads. And in fact, really value your skill set.
Yep, wonderful.
Georgie, someone's asked a question, and it's an important one for us to address, and that is that the scope is limited for international students in that companies prioritise citizens and permanent residents. And the question is about how do we go about this where we're talented and we're valuable, but our opportunities are limited. Yeah. Now, my reaction to that is, first, I think it's wrong. I think that is not correct, that the opportunities are limited. What I think most students get caught up in is going to the big companies, is going to the Big Four and the other consulting companies.
Sure. But
when everyone's trying to go to a few companies, there's limited opportunities. There's lots of people born in Australia that can't get into PwC. It's extremely, extremely competitive. And 97% of businesses are SMEs, small and medium enterprises. Now, SMEs do not have a rule that you must be a permanent resident. So I think there's a perception out there amongst international students and graduates that companies aren't willing to hire them because all they're thinking about is the top end of town. Mm-hmm. There are heaps of opportunities. You just need to look in different spaces. And this comes down to your research you mentioned before, is students could be spending this time to researching the millions of companies that are out there that aren't PwC, that they can get amazing graduate experiences in, and they may end up in PwC in 5 years' time or 2 years' time, like we've had clients do. But maybe they need to look in different spots rather than just focusing on 30 companies when there's millions of companies.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. I can categorically say that any organisation and any organisation I've worked with or worked for will take the best person, no matter where they've come from, you know, whether they're an international student, whether they're a PR, whatever it might be, they will take the best person. But you're right, the competition for grad jobs these days is really, really tough. And so it might sometimes feel like international students are missing out because perhaps that's the cohort that you're engaging with and comparing to, but the same percentage of students from Australia who are citizens will have also missed out on those jobs because the numbers and the quantums are just big, and that's really tough. And so you're absolutely right. I think looking to organisations that don't have a grad program per se, but every year might take 3 or 4 graduates into specific roles, is something that no one should, whether you're a local student or an international student, no one should discount. And I think sometimes the experience you get in those organisations can be richer than the experience you get in the big corporates and the big professional services firms. And the reason I say that is because if you're one of only 3 or 4 people at that more junior level, then the breadth of what you're going to experience is really big. And an SME has a lot less resources in terms of the number of people to do different jobs. So at times you'll have to step up more quickly than perhaps in a big corporate. There'll be less layers of bureaucracy to get to the top. So you'll have engagement with more senior leadership more quickly. You might be asked to do things that are a real stretch for you because simply at that point in time, you're the only person that's available to do that work. And so suddenly you're getting experiences that maybe your friend who did go to Telstra, for example, isn't getting because they're more in a program where it's very finite in terms of what their job role is, what their scope is in the area that they're in. So, I look back even on some of my friends who, when we left university and the paths we took, and a couple of them did go to SMEs or kind of smaller organisations. And when I look where some of those guys are, when they might have stayed in those organisations and where they've ended up, they've moved very quickly. Their role scope has grown astronomically, because they just kept on getting to do more and more and more because they were in a smaller business who was happy to take a few risks or, just had less people to do the work. So, I would caution anyone to ever think that one type of grad role is better than the other as well. I think there's sometimes a danger. We might be going slightly off topic here, but there's a danger in thinking that going to the big corporate or going to the big professional services firm or the big consulting firm, that's success and that's the best versus going to an SME or a not-for-profit or a startup. I think they just offer a different value proposition, both of which can be really exciting and some of which, will lead on to bigger and better things.
Yep, and it's not off topic at all because for international students, some of the big firms actually have policies that they will not take on anyone that not only don't have residency, but they're not citizens. And so hence, for them to get their first jobs in Australia, internationals really should be considering smaller companies. And there was a good question from Hassan where he says, how do we find out about these smaller companies? And my answer to that is, like I would for anything, research and Google it.
Yeah.
Google it. Find out who's doing great things out there and subscribing to articles in the industry that you're looking at will give you many insights into which companies out there would be suited to you.
And LinkedIn is the greatest database for companies and people that work at those companies and what they do. LinkedIn is absolutely amazing for doing this research.
Yeah.
I think that's right. And even, don't discount things like Seek. It might not always be listed as a grad job, but it will be, a first level entry job in terms of you need a university qualification, but they're not looking for experience. And so, using things like Seek and the other online job portals, Glassdoor is great. There's lots of spots to figure it out. And it is just about research. And sometimes it does take a lot of research, but it's worth it.
Do you have any thoughts on how internationals can access what we call the hidden job market? Because as we know, only 15% of jobs are ever advertised. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Look, I think The advice I would give is what I would give more senior people, because it's a little bit similar when you're looking for those really senior roles, that again, often that's done through networking and personal relationships and references, not done through a job ad going on to Seek or using a recruiter or what have you. And how you do it is essentially networking, and it's hard work. You know, networking is time consuming. It requires a fairly strong level of resilience, because for every phone call you make to see if you can maybe have coffee with someone that might be able to open some doors for you, the chances are they're going to say they don't have enough time. But it's about just being, you know, almost treating it, if anyone's ever done a role in a call center or a sales type role, where it's about numbers. So you make enough phone calls and eventually you have some success. Yes. So it really is around networking, and LinkedIn is a great tool for that. But I think trying to find those personal connections is the best way. So I would say every time there's an opportunity to attend some kind of networking event face-to-face, obviously not right now, but face-to-face or via Zoom, where you can engage with employers or interesting people in business, or people that just might have some perspective or some contacts, then take advantage of it. And be really methodical about it as well. You know, it's almost like you go through the Rolodex, the old Rolodex, and you just keep ticking it off. And then you'll meet someone and they'll suggest 3 more people you should speak to. So you ring those 3 people and you tick them off. And it is, as I said, it's hard work. But that's how you kind of get into that hidden market of roles and opportunities.
It's interesting that last night I attended an online webinar for sustainable fashion businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And to my surprise, I was only one of 3 that attended. So I don't know what happened. However, we actually spent 90 minutes on the phone together. Now, there wasn't a student there. And there's a gentleman here, a person, Galaxy, asking, I've done renewable energy course, how do I get into the workforce? If renewable energy had anything to do with sustainable fashion, then you would have been only one of 3 people on that call last night, and your ability to storytell and let those 3 people know that, you know, you're the person out there that's really interested in a job there, you would have got the job. So even in times right now where you can't go to physical events, going to online webinars are incredible opportunities to let people know that you're out there, you're interested, and that you're the person that should be getting the job. And there was no talk about who was a resident or non-resident. It's all about the value that you can bring an organisation. So, yeah, I think it's a really good point for the listeners. Sorry, Jared.
The same applies there, Dom. I think for people that need to do their internships, students need to do internships. You can't physically go to an organisation anymore, but a remote internship now gives you that valuable experience that coming out of this period of time, you're then the one that actually has that experience, which I'm sure, Georgie, you would agree is hugely valuable experience to have to give yourself a competitive advantage.
Absolutely. And I think it just also demonstrates a level of motivation that then people say, well, that's the motivation that I want when they're working for me. So even if that internship or that traineeship was maybe it was completely different to what they end up doing in their graduate job or their first, you know, sort of permanent role, and once we're all back to working face to face again. But the fact that that particular individual was like, okay, well, I can do a remote internship. Maybe it's not quite as exciting as the internship I was going to do if we were allowed to be near each other. It's still worth doing, so I'm going to learn something. It gives me something great to do in this time of lockdown, and I'm sure that it'll provide me opportunities to then transfer, you know, to when I do get to take on that grad role. And that's the type of person that then I think employers will want to hire. You know, they didn't waste their time during the downturn or during the lockdown. They got in there and did some really interesting stuff. Took a punt, and you know, I think it just shows an attitude and a mindset that employers want.
Yeah, perfect way to show you've got that attitude.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we could keep talking for another hour, Georgie, but I did promise you that we'd keep it close to an hour. So
don't stop.
Yeah, I do have one more question that, but with your background, I do want to ask. Before I do that, someone has just asked a question saying that their career advisor said that marketing is not a good option in the future when getting a job. Could I get some advice on this? I don't know. That just blows my mind, because I know even in our business, the most in-demand graduates we are getting asked for by all our clients is, do you have anyone that knows digital marketing? We're just getting inundated with requests. It is the most popular skill set to have now is marketing. So to ever ask that question, I'd ignore that advice and I'd double down on marketing because it is hugely in demand right now.
And especially anyone that knows how to use the contemporary tools such as Salesforce, HubSpot, Agile CRMs, any marketer or anyone that wants to be a marketer right now, you should be self-studying, online learning for those very popular CRMs because, you know, think about it. Marketers make money for the business. As an auditor, I cost the money business, right? So they don't want more auditors. They want more marketers because they make money. So that is so wrong that that person, dare I say, is an idiot. No, I didn't say that.
Thanks. So, Georgie, because we've got your unique sort of background and what you're doing now, being so well connected to China in your time in your profession, and you're visiting frequently, and I believe your husband's often in China as well. There's been a lot of media about China during COVID. Donald Trump's been pointing fingers. The Australian politicians have been asking for inquests into how the coronavirus started and, really sort of wanting to go and do deep analysis into where it started and how it started and holding people accountable for it. That has led to circumstances that we've seen on the news and I've heard personally, which I find pretty disgusting. Let's call it how it is. There's racism that has popped its head up. That we will have people listening that are from China. And I know it's not easy to offer advice around this, but I just wanted to open this discussion with you about your thoughts on it and how people might be able to deal with it, in that there are things happening that most Australians do not agree with. It is a small minority, but, there's things that are going on that we wish they weren't. And I just wanted to raise that with you, with your experience and exposure to China, is to maybe have a bit of a quick conversation about that before we finish.
Yeah. I think, if one of the really interesting things I think coming out of everything that's happening right now in terms of COVID is the whole kind of geopolitical landscape and what things will look like in the future around that. And there's no denying that things will be different. And I think this has really come to the fore in the past few days, obviously, with everything that's been happening around, Australia looking for an inquiry into how it all happened and obviously the implications for China. And so, like you, I've had clients, telling us that they have people from China in their workforces that are feeling uncomfortable about what people are thinking about them, and that there is an undertone of racism. And I think, it's an interesting time because I think never, certainly in my lifetime, and I think most people's lifetime, have people felt more levels of fear and feeling scared for the future and feeling scared about what's going to happen next. And I think that sometimes does create then behaviours and sentiments that aren't appropriate, but that they absolutely come from a place of people just being scared. And I think one of the things that people are scared of right now is that COVID is coming from somewhere and it's coming in. And so that's, I think, where a lot of this is perpetuating. And then when you see global leaders maybe not exhibiting the right behaviours as well, then I think people just kind of figure that it's okay to do it. And it's absolutely not. And I really, really feel for people at the moment who are experiencing that firsthand. I think that, it's an issue that's being kind of talked about at an international diplomacy level, absolutely. But I think we can't forget that then it affects, you guys as international students. And, there was an article in one of the, on the news the other night about, a GP who's from China who's been feeling it with some of his patients. And I think, I can't give advice per se about it because I don't think I have the answers. I do think, however, that I would certainly say that I accept that it's absolutely the case, that I recognise that it must be quite hurtful. And then if you are feeling that there is any kind of racism or discrimination that you're feeling, that you should raise that with appropriate people, and that talking about it is really important. So whether it is going to your university counsellors, whether it's talking to a friend, whether it's speaking to a mentor, whatever it is, I think that, it's important. We need to recognise that it's happening, recognise that it could be making people feel, really, really quite awful, and that it's absolutely fine for you to then try and do something about it, and that, it's not just you being, silly or sensitive or what have you. But I think it's an unfortunate byproduct of the fear, I think, that people are feeling in this current environment. And it's really sad, because from first-hand experience, I've always said my favourite 2 years in my life were in China. When I'm allowed to go back, I will continue to go back there. It's a brilliant place with brilliant people, and Australia is really lucky that we have been able to work really well with China, that we have all of our international students coming in, that we have great economic relationships, great business relationships, great investments on both ways, and I hope that continues after this is all over, and it goes. That's something that does go back to the way that it's always been, because I think it's a great thing for our country and a great thing for China.
Yeah, and that most Australians think like you do, Georgie, and the same as Dom and I. That is the majority, and so we can't let the minority rule. But equally, I think with cultural backgrounds, which you'll understand very well, and you mentioned it before, is putting your hand out and speaking to someone about it. I think is probably, if we're going to give any sort of advice, is something that everyone should do if they are feeling uncomfortable or whatever it is please tell someone and please talk about it.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. Well, Georgie, thank you very much. And also on that note too, the governments for international students are doing a lot to try and help. So you look at Study New South Wales and Study Melbourne and Study Perth and Study Queensland. If anyone does need to speak to someone, you can reach out to those organisations. They are there to help. And Georgie, if people want to follow what you're doing, or what you on Twitter, or do you have a Twitter handle, or do you post on LinkedIn? How do people follow more about what you're up to?
Yeah, so I post on LinkedIn. I do have a Twitter handle, but it's not very well used. But certainly LinkedIn is probably the best spot. That's sort of where I tend to post things and where I sort of work from, I guess. So yeah, that's probably the easiest way. But yeah, if you look at my Twitter account, you'll get lots about football and a bit about the kids and funny memes, but that's probably about all. So it's not a place you're going to go and get anything that's going to help you in your career.
Who's your footy team? I can't believe I didn't ask you this.
Yeah.
I am a Mad Tiger.
Oh, right. Bandwagon jumper from 2017.
No, I've been a Tiger since the day I was born.
Right.
I never had a choice.
So do you think we should just play under closed doors and just get back to footy as quick as we can?
Oh, look, so the footy nut in me says, yes, I would love everyone to just get back to playing football and, play it without crowds, and we can all go back to having stuff to watch on Friday, Saturday and Sunday, Thursday. But I'm also conscious that I think it sends some quite mixed messages around, if it's okay for football players to be playing football, does that mean that I can go and hang out with my 20 friends in the park? So I think it's just that really interesting balance between what messages it sends to the public. But I certainly hope we do get back to football before the end of the season, because I really miss it. So I miss all sport. I'm a bit of a sporty nut, so I'm missing my sport a lot.
Yeah, that's it. I'm lost without being able to watch Liverpool win the title and be able to watch AFL on the weekend. So I think we need to solve this problem.
Yeah. I also think the sport that gets back first, I think, has a big opportunity to actually end up, so if AFL can come back before, say, soccer or some of the overseas leagues, then, it might open up some gateways for AFL to become more of an international sport, likewise with rugby or any of them that can kind of get back quickly. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, which is like one of the many things coming out of COVID, the opportunities and the innovations. And I know you said you and your husband over wine talk about life post-COVID, and it's a topic for another day, but there's going to be so many opportunities coming out the back end of these next few months for just business models that we have not seen before. And it's probably a bit harder for students to think like this because they're not in a business environment. But there's opportunities coming out of this that do not exist right now. So be open-minded to what they are and be ready to pounce on them and be ready to help as you can, because it is going to be a bit of a new world.
That's right.
So, Georgie, thank you so much. We have taken up longer of your time than I promised you. I've loved the discussion with you, so I could keep going for another couple of hours. So thank you very much for your insights. It's very much appreciated. We wish you the best with your business and getting through, obviously, this COVID-19 period as well and into the future. And I hope you can get back to China soon to go spend some more time there.
So do I. And thanks, guys, for having me. And stay safe, everyone. And good luck.
Thank you. Thanks, Georgie. Thanks to you too, Dom.
No worries. Always a pleasure with my new plant.
Thanks, Dom.
See you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, guys.